strange man with big eyes and careworn face. I did not recognize in him anything I had ever known, but my sister, who was 2 years older than I, went to his bosom of her own motion. She knew him, whilst I submitted to his caresses rather for the reason that my mother urged me forward than because of any affection I felt for him. Frank, however, would not even permit a kiss. The gaunt and grizzled stranger terrified him. "Come here, my little man," my father said. My little man. Across the space of half a century I can still hear the sad reproach in his voice. "Won't you come and see your poor old father when he comes home from the war?" My little man. How significant that phrase seems to me now. The war had in very truth come between this patriot and his sons. I had forgotten him. The baby had never known him. Frank crept beneath the rail fence and stood there, well out of reach, like a cautious kitten warily surveying an alien dog. At last the soldier stooped, and drawing from his knapsack a big red apple, held it toward the staring babe, confidently calling, "Now I guess he'll come to his poor old pap home from the war." The mother apologized. "He doesn't know you, Dick. How could he? He was only 9 months old when you went away. He'll go to you by and by." The babe crept slowly toward the shining lure. My father caught him despite his kicking and hugged him close. "Now I've got you," he exulted. Then we all went into the little front room, and the soldier laid off his heavy army shoes. My mother brought a pillow to put under his head, and so at last he stretched out on the floor the better to rest his tired, aching bones, and there I joined him. "Oh, Belle," he said in tones of utter content, "this is what I've dreamed about 1,000,000 times." Frank and I grew each moment more friendly, and soon began to tumble over him while Mother hastened to cook something for him to eat. He asked for hot biscuits and honey and plenty of coffee. That was a mystic hour, and yet how little I can recover of it. The afternoon glides into evening while the soldier talks, and at last we all go out to the barn to watch Mother milk the cow. I hear him ask about the crops, the neighbors. The sunlight passes. Mother leads the way back to the house. My father follows, carrying little Frank in his arms. He is a strange man no longer. Each moment his voice sinks deeper into my remembrance. He is my father. That I feel ringing through the dim halls of my consciousness. Harriet clings to his hand in perfect knowledge and confidence. We eat our bread and milk. The trundle bed is pulled out. We children clamber in, and I go to sleep to the music of his resonant voice, recounting the story of the battles he had seen and the marches he had made. The emergence of an individual consciousness from the void is, after all, the most amazing fact of human life, and I should like to spend much of this first chapter in groping about in the luminous shadow of my infant world, because, deeply considered, childish impressions are the fundamentals upon which an author's fictional output is based. But to linger might weary my reader at the outset, although I count myself most fortunate in the fact that my boyhood was spent in the midst of a charming landscape and during a certain heroic era of Western settlement. The men and women of that far time loom large in my thinking, for they possessed not only the spirit of adventurers but the courage of warriors. Aside from the natural distortion of a boy's imagination, I am quite sure that the pioneers of 1860 still retained something broad and fine in their action, something a boy might honorably imitate. The earliest dim scene in my memory is that of a soft, warm evening. I am cradled in the lap of my sister Harriet, who is sitting on the doorstep beneath a low roof. It is midsummer, and at our feet lies a mat of dark green grass from which a frog is croaking. The stars are out, and above the high hills to the east a mysterious glow is glorifying the sky. The cry of the small animal at last conveys to my sister's mind a notion of distress, and rising, she peers closely along the path. Starting back with a cry of alarm, she calls, and my mother hurries out. She, too, examines the ground, and at last points out to me a long striped snake with a poor, shrieking little tree toad in its mouth. The horror of this scene fixes it in my mind. My mother beats the serpent with a stick. The mangled victim hastens away, and the curtain falls. I must have been about 4 years old at this time, although there is nothing to determine the precise date. Our house, a small frame cabin, stood on the eastern slope of a long ridge and faced across a valley which seemed very wide to me then. And in the middle of it lay a marsh filled with monsters, from which the water people sang night by night. Beyond was a wooded mountain. This doorstone must have been a favorite evening seat for my sister, for I remember many other delicious gloamings. Bats whirl and squeak in the odorous dusk. Nighthawks whiz and boom. And over the dark forest wall a prodigious moon miraculously rolls. Fireflies dart through the grass. And in a lone tree just outside the fence, a whippoorwill sounds his plaintive note. Sweet, very sweet, and wonderful are all these. The marsh across the lane was a sinister, menacing place even by day, for there, so my sister Harriet warned me, serpents swarmed, eager to bite runaway boys. And if you step in the mud between the tufts of grass, she said, you will surely sink out of sight. At night this teeming bog became a place of dank and horrid mystery. Bears and wolves and wildcats were reported as ruling the dark woods just beyond. Only the dooryard and the road seemed safe for little men, and even there I wished my mother to be within immediate call. My father, who had bought his farm on time just before the war, could not enlist among the first volunteers, though he was deeply moved to do so, till his land was paid for. But at last in 1863, on the very day that he made the last payment on the mortgage, he put his name down on the roll and went back to his wife, a soldier. I have heard my mother say that this was one of the darkest moments of her life, and if you think about it, you will understand the reason why. My sister was only 5 years old, I was 3, and Frank was a babe in the cradle. Broken-hearted at the thought of the long separation, and scared by visions of battle, my mother begged the soldier not to go. But he was of the stern stuff which makes patriots, and besides, his name was already on the roll. Therefore he went away to join Grant's army at Vicksburg. What sacrifice! What folly! Like thousands of others, he deserted his wife and children for an abstraction, a mere sentiment. For a striped silken rag, he put his life in peril. For $13 per month he marched and fought, while his plow rusted in the shed and his harvest called to him in vain. My conscious memory holds nothing of my mother's agony of waiting, nothing of the dark days when the baby was ill and the doctor far away. But into my subconscious ear her voice sank, and the words Grant, Lincoln, Sherman, furlough, mustered out, ring like bells, deep-toned and vibrant. I shared dimly in every emotional utterance of the neighbors who came to call, and a large part of what I am is due to the impression of these deeply passionate and poetic years. Dim pictures come to me. I see my mother at the spinning wheel. I help her fill the candle molds. I hold in my hands the queer carding combs with their crinkly teeth. But my first definite connected recollection is the scene of my father's return at the close of the war. I was not quite 5 years old, and the events of that day are so commingled with later impressions, experiences which came long after, that I cannot be quite sure which are true and which imagined, but the picture as a whole is very vivid and very complete. Thus it happened that my first impressions of life were martial, and my training military, for my father brought back from his 2 years campaigning under Sherman and Thomas the temper and the habit of a soldier. He became naturally the dominant figure in my horizon, and his scheme of discipline impressed itself almost at once upon his children. I suspect that we had fallen into rather free and easy habits under Mother's government, for she was too jolly, too tender-hearted to engender fear in us even when she threatened us with a switch or a shingle. We soon learned, however, that the soldier's promise of punishment was swift and precise in its fulfillment. We seldom presumed a second time on his forgetfulness or tolerance. We knew he loved us, for he often took us to his knees of an evening and told us stories of marches and battles, or chanted war songs for us, but the moments of his tenderness were few, and his fondling did not prevent him from almost instant use of the rod if he thought either of us needed it. His own boyhood had been both hard and short. Born of farmer folk in Oxford County, Maine, his early life had been spent on the soil in and about Locke's Mills with small chance of schooling. Later, as a teamster, and finally a shipping clerk for Amos Lawrence, he had enjoyed 3 mightily improving years in Boston. He loved to tell of his life there, and it is in